This is a book review and some interesting ideas I found in this book. Never split the difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. I'll start with a review. I'll probably give this book a 3, or maybe even a high 3. It has some interesting ideas. The book is quite straightforward, easy to follow, and quite engaging. I found some interesting ideas. I read other books about negotiation, but this is I wouldn't say like much better than the other one, but it's pretty good. Like most of those, it has some, I don't know if it's directly self-help, but similar to all those books, the problem is that they offer too many ideas and solutions that sometimes is hard to implement in your life. But however, I still found some interesting ideas. I wrote them down and we'll go through one of the important ones. So it's not getting a 4 though. Got close to a 4, but not there yet. Let's see the notes. Simply asking how do I supposed to do it seemed to have an impact on the other side reaction in a negotiation. Just asking how I'm supposed to do that. So he has some examples from real life negotiations that it actually helps and impacts the reaction. There has to be a whole team listening to demands, since one person tends to selective listening. It's important that they actually have a whole team in the FBI or similar agencies that listen to demands, because one person tends to selective listening, only listen to certain parts and disregard the others, and that's why, or just re-listen. He also recommends to re-listen to the demands over and over again, because every time you hear different things. Mirroring, that is repeating what the person wants, is an effective way to communicate and avoid conflict. So just mirror what the other side is saying is usually help and is effective way to communicate. Sometimes going right to negative without trying to make it look better is the best way to communicate. Sometimes they try to sugarcoat things, but he says that sometimes it's just better to just say it as it is, and don't try to give say things before to kind of soothe it out. Just say it. People have an innate need to be understood. That's why if we show them we understand them, they will be more open. So we need to show people that we understand them. That's why they actually open up. Since people like to have an autonomy, they want to have the freedom to say no. After giving them that chance, the negotiation can start. So people like to express their autonomy by saying no. So we just give them an opportunity to say no, and they feel that they have autonomy, and then negotiation can start. It's an interesting. The notion that more yeses are good for sales is actually quite the opposite, since no is better. So he claims that, I'm not fully agreeing with him, but he claims that the idea, usually in sales they say that the more yeses you get, the more possible, the higher the possibility that the customer will buy the product or anything that you're trying to sell. But he claims that the yeses sometimes is actually not good. You don't want to have yeses because sometimes they're disingenuous. What you want to have is actually a no, and when they say no, you can actually convince them otherwise. Next one is compromise is not always a good solution, because you might end up with one black shoe and one brown shoe. There's a pound sign before it. I like this thing, like this note. So you always we tend to think that compromise is the best solution for conflict, but he says that not always is good, because if one person want you to wear black and you want to wear brown shoes, a compromise is 1 and 1, And this is not a good compromise. So compromise is not always, that's the kind of the metaphor to explain or to show why compromise is not always the best solution. No deal is better than a bad deal. So sometimes it's better to walk away than have a bad deal. Using fairness on both sides is a good tactic. You just use I think it's a fair offer, or I think it's not fair. Things like that, and actually help people just because we use the fairness. People want to be fair. Prospect theory is that people prefer sure gains over less ones. It's not really known ones, just wrote it down here just to remind myself. So prospect theory, because it kind of like has this thing with loss aversion, but we prefer to have a sure thing in our hands, even when it's less than if we get less money for the sure thing, we prefer that over the less sure thing. Asking how tend to lead to collaboration and is usually good for negotiation. You simply ask how and people are more willing to help. It's like, and collaborate. Also in negotiation, I think was the first note about how I'm supposed to do that really helps negotiations. There are a few types of negotiators: accommodating, assertive, and analytics. Analysts. The idea is accommodating is you try to help the other side. So you usually give up things. Assertive is like you go straight to the point. You think that's the one he recommends. And analysts are the one that do a lot of research in advance. He has pros and cons for every one of them, and he recommends, I think, if I remember right, the assertive one, because it's straight to the point. But knowing them could help change your approach and understanding them better. So you need to know yours and the other side style, because sometimes if you both being accommodating, for example, or you want accommodating, one assertive, you can have clashes just because the style, not because what you're actually trying, what the policy. Black Swan is the unpredicted. I think this is the name of his company, the author company, the Black Swan. There is always need to look for the Black Swan, which is the unpredicted. You need to figure it out. Negotiation should start with a 65% anchor and come up after. Use the 3-no system. So you should start with a 65% of your price, and then you should come up after that from there on. And you should also use the 3-no system. Just don't accept a no, or don't. You can say, no, I cannot do this price because blah, blah, blah. And I can only do this price. He also recommends, I think I wrote it down, so let's just say that. He also recommends getting a random number. So if you I can only do $841 for this, no more than that, because that sounds like you really know what you're talking about. Positive leverage is when you have something the other party wants. Negative leverage is when you have something that can damage the other party. So there's usually, he split leverage into two. There is positive leverage is when you have something that a party wants. That's a positive leverage. But negative leverage is when you can damage the other party. It's a little different. That's the last one. It's important to be engaged in a conflict and not running away from it, as long as you are genuine and not falling into emotional situation. So it's good to have conflict or engage into it. Don't run away from it like fire. Just trying to resolve it and be genuine, and don't fall into emotional situation, because if you don't have those last two, then the conflict will not go well. But if you do, it should end well. So that's it for notes. Again, this book is almost getting to 4, so it's a high 3. If you haven't listened to any or read any of those books, I definitely recommend. And there is definitely some lessons here. That's it. Thank you.